That's right, you heard it here first, or second, or third, or whatever, but it's time to fire up that hair straightener and bust out those colored skinny jeans, because the Vans Warped Tour is back, baby. Let's get some tickets. Okay, so it's not actually the Warped Tour, it's more of a festival, and it's in 3 places, DC, Orlando, and Long Beach, but let's, grab some tickets at the very least, and oh boy. I mean, did we really think it was coming back the way it was? Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Make sure to leave a like and leave a comment down below. What do you think of the Vans 30th anniversary tour? And if you're new, consider subscribing. Now, the Vans Warped Tour 30th anniversary does appear to be a bit of a departure from what we knew as Warped Tour. Back in my day, with the cost of admission being roughly $40, I was able to buy a few band t-shirts, various other pieces of merch, and still be able to buy a very fairly priced $8 bottle of water so I could fight off heat stroke and dehydration. Now, for the Orlando 2-day show, it costs a paltry $250, because 40 plus 40 equals 250. The math makes sense. I'm kidding. I know that I'm talking 2015 prices versus 2025. We're 10 years later and inflation is a thing and all of that, but it does kind of make me think. Part of the allure of the Warped Tour was these bands would come to smaller or less traveled states like Minnesota that somehow gets missed on every single band's US tour. And for an affordable price, you'd get a chance to see these bands that you might not get a chance to see otherwise. To me, Warped Tour was essentially one of those sampler CDs that you'd get at record stores or in, guitar magazines that allowed you to get a look at these bands, maybe become a fan, buy a shirt, and then when they came to your state proper as either a headlining tour or as a supporting act, you would be able to go see them and support them in that way. And in doing so, we are helping these smaller bands that are either doing it on an indie basis or with the help of smaller record labels continue to make great music, continue to make a living doing this, and therefore keeping the punk, metal, and alternative music scene alive. Now, since Warped Tour has ended, we have seen a rise in the cost of ticket prices, no small part thanks to Ticketmaster and Live Nation, who believe that concerts should be a once a year or once in a lifetime luxury experience to go hear the music that you hear on your streaming platform live. What a joy. Go f*** yourself. I know there were rumors about the reason that Warped Tour actually formally ended was because it wasn't financially viable anymore. And while that may have played a small part of it, the creator Kevin Lyman actually did say that the community aspect of Warped Tour had completely either disappeared or was on its way out. Warped Tour started as more of a punk rock summer camp with bands like Bad Religion, NoFX, the Aquabats, Blink-182 being a part of their early lineup. And by the end of the road, it evolved from a mostly punk and like-minded roster to something including some deathcore bands, some hip-hop, and anything in between. It evolved into something truly diverse. I would argue the intermingling of these bands in subgenre would help strengthen a community because it gives birth to creativity, but we're missing one of the most important parts of being a modern band, the internet. Plenty of fighting online, certain bands calling each other out and saying that they don't want to tour with them. There's also the component of these bands saying that they don't want to be considered a Warped Tour-esque band. Now, don't get me wrong, there were plenty of bands that probably shouldn't have been on the Warped Tour circuit, let alone in human society, but the internet did what it was supposed to do, and it put that information out there, and some of those artists were held accountable, and the most extreme versions of that would be Blood on the Dance Floor and The Lost Prophets, and don't Google it, just trust me, it's rough. But being a Warped Tour band wasn't such a bad thing, right? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you listen to from, 2010, 2015 that it's like, okay, yeah, so that doesn't hold up. It doesn't really sound great, or it was very trendy at the time, but it didn't last. But a lot of those bands went on to do really great things, and the intermingling of genres and subgenres has made metalcore turn into something that I would argue is a little bit more commercially viable now. For the most part, I think the bands that fit the Warped Tour bill, if it were to come back, have created a very welcoming and inclusive space, which is good. That's what you want in something that right now, given the state of America, we are in short supply of. I personally would like to see something like Warped Tour come back, whether it's Warped Tour proper or something, you know, similar to that, because looking back as an adult now, I can recognize how important it was to a teenage and young adult me. While the Warped Tour 30th anniversary celebration is something cool to celebrate the legacy of the institution that helped shape the current landscape of punk and metal music that we have today, it's also quite a hefty price tag, and that's just for the people that live in the area. If you're, I don't know, let's say a teenager who lives in rural Minnesota and you deliver pizzas in your beat up Jeep, forget about it. The cost of flights, lodging, road trip, you know, expenses, whatever, it makes this a premium experience. And it kind of goes against what Warped Tour really was, which was a place for music discovery, for community, for just finding good music and hanging out. This is 100% a bid at nostalgia, and there's nothing wrong with celebrating something 100%. It's just that, like, it feels very different than what Warped Tour was, and it is completely different. It's a festival. It's essentially a celebration of life, which is another word for a funeral. On the flip side of that, these bands that are going out to perform these shows, they need to make a living. And with diminishing ticket sales and greedy venue owners deciding they deserve a cut of bands' merch sales, all of that just trickles down into the pockets of the consumers, and it's up to us to make up that deficit. It's not the band's fault. My advice, if a band comes to your state or your city, go see them live. And if you can't go see them live, go on their website, buy a t-shirt, buy a record, buy a CD, download the album from their website, or share that music with your friends. That one is free and easy to do. Now, the point of this video is not to hack on Kevin Lyman or the Vans Warped Tour as it is. It's just, you know, looking at this and seeing it called Vans Warped Tour is a little bit bittersweet, because this thing that I loved when I was growing up is completely different, and it's no different than When We Were Young Fest or Coachella or, you know, like all of these things that I think they try to tug on the nostalgia strings a little bit to get you in the door. Is it cool? Yes. If it was coming close to me, would I go? Maybe. I don't know if for $250 if it would truly be worth it to me, but if you can swing it, it might be worth checking out. And looking at the lineup, it's a lot of bands that I did see in the final years of Vans Warped Tour, and some old faces, some new faces. So it is doing what Warped Tour did, just behind a $250 paywall. And you gotta do what you gotta do, right? But at the end of the day, what do I know? I'm just an aging millennial and a former scene kid who hasn't quite grown out of the studded belt phase. Little straightened hair James would be so proud of how far I've come. But leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think. Would you go see a Vans Warped Tour, like a proper tour revival? Anyway, I'll catch you next time.